Folks, I'm Doug Page, and today I'm with Kelly James, a Chicago-based freelance writer and lawyer, and author of a book that's soon to be published, The Book That Almost Got Me Fired. Kelly is very successful, but one day she decided, for reasons that many would understand, to return to corporate America. This book details some of those exasperating days and what she learned about herself. Kelly, thank you so very much for being with me today.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
I'm so glad. So, just for the sake of background for our audience, what prompted you to go from full-time, freelance writer, independent person, your own boss, to full-time employee?
I had two major career transitions. The first was going from a full-time attorney to full-time freelance, which was a big shift that I did around the time I turned 30. Then I freelanced full-time for 22 years, which is, when most of us come out of college at that 22-year mark, and decided to go in-house. I was ghostwriting full-time, doing a few articles here and there. And while I was making enough money, then the nature of the work was erratic. I would be very busy on a proposal or very busy with a book, and then an agent would sit on a project or an editor would sit on a project. And at one point I had, I think, 4 proposals in the works and none of them sold. And when you're writing book proposals, if the book proposal doesn't sell, you don't have a book contract. And it was, that kind of the roller coaster that I was getting a little tired of. And this company was hiring, and the company happened to be like 3.2 miles from my house because I looked it up on MapQuest. And I sent a resume in on a whim, got an interview 2 days later, and then they offered me the job. And so I was a little conflicted about giving up my freelance career. So I told one of my friends, I went to lunch that day after I got the job offer, and I said, you know what? I'm going to go in-house and I'm going to write about it. I'm going to be like Barbara Ehrenreich writing nickel and dimed. It's going to be, my own look at corporate America. So, and they had excellent health insurance. That it really was all about the health insurance.
Well, there you go. And, it's interesting when you interview, you sense one kind of environment at an office when you interview for a job, when you're walking through there, meeting everybody for the first time. And then what was the environment like when you really started? Was there a discernible difference?
What it was interesting to me, again, having been out of corporate America for 22 years, it was a much more casual workplace than what I had been used to before. And again, I'd always worked in law firms. I'd worked at Pampered Chef a couple times. I freelanced there, but this was a very chill atmosphere. Most of the people had sweatshirts. I would say about 50% of people had giant headphones on, and it was quiet as a tomb. I mean, it was just so quiet in there, very little interaction except for the sales guys. Sorry about that. The sales guys at one end of the building, and then the SEO guys at the other end of the building, because they actually had to talk amongst themselves. The rest of the employees were kind of disconnected, like everyone was in their own little cube in their own little cube farm.
Interesting. One of the things you write so well about is sort of the cultural difference about, working for yourself versus working in an office. I guess how big of a shock was it to you to go back to an office after being away from one, really, if you think about it, as an employee for 22 years?
Correct. It was a major shock. The biggest thing for me, honestly, was having to sit at a desk all day long. I've worked from home for a long time. I get up a lot. I take my dog around the block. I throw in a load of laundry, get a snack, maybe do some dishes, but I don't have to sit in one place all the time. And I don't care how progressive your office is, they're not going to be okay with you getting up and leaving every hour to go for like a 5 or 10-minute walk. And that's what I'm used to doing. And honestly, the first 2 or 3 weeks, I was exhausted at the end of the day, just from sitting virtually motionless all day, which I just was not used to doing. The other thing was, now I had to get up and shower and put on adult clothes and actually be at my desk, where my neighbors will tell you, I have walked my dog in my pajama bottoms and a sweatshirt many times, because if you're, working from home, that's one of the luxuries. You can wear what you want. And even if you're on camera, we all have the nice top for the camera and the pajama bottoms on the bottom. But definitely the sitting all day, the having to be on someone else's schedule. And I think I would add third, as a freelancer, when I know I'm done for the day, I'm done. I punch out. When you're working in corporate America, you can't go to your boss at 2 or 2:30 and say, I'm pretty much done for the day, I'm going to go home. So people stay at their desks and they look at Facebook, or they go on Wikipedia, or they find other ways to waste time, but I think very little gets done between the hours of about 2:30 and 3 and 5 o'clock in any American office.
Yeah, I suspect you're probably right about that. One of the things I've seen written about, especially, on the heels of COVID-19, and maybe you've seen the same thing, is that, you know, coming off the COVID-19 work from home policies, which, everybody was basically working from home all the time,
Right.
there were, as a result, you had some people who just became so used to working from home, they couldn't handle working in an office anymore. Did you see anything like that?
I didn't, but I think that's because I call myself an extrovert in an introvert's job. I actually had dinner with two of the women I used to work with at the company I wrote about a couple days ago. And my friend Elaine was saying I was the only person in the office. When I went in the office, I was like, good morning, how's your day going? Good morning, because that's how I am. And most people were people responded, but no one was really super friendly. And then I realized, oh, they don't want to have a conversation. They're just in the nook to get their coffee and sit down again. I think that we're going to kind of see it unfolding as a lot of companies are pushing employees to come back or going, forcing hybrid employment on people. I think that as a creative professional, I know that I am much more efficient and effective if you let me work from home. I can get much more done. And then there's always going to be some people who say, well, we want you in the office because we want to brainstorm and we want to facilitate this. And I do think there's some value in that. When I onboarded with my current company, I went to Atlanta for 4 days and I met all the people at the Atlanta office, and I'm good at connecting with people. And it is easier to connect then after you've met someone in person. I think though that knowing how to interact with people in person and have meetings and that kind of thing, if you've always worked from home, it is a skill you need to have in case you do go back to the office. It's dealing with other humans, and it's something that we all need to be better at.
Yeah. It would seem so. It almost sounds like you're worried that in some cases, if you're working from home all the time, or you've worked from home, say for many years before ever working in an office, in some ways, maybe your social skills have been a little bit arrested.
I truly think there's something to that. And as I know you mentioned that your kids are in college, mine are a little behind yours, and they're 19 and 14. And we have a lot of conversations about the importance of this kind of interaction where you're not looking at your phone, you're actually engaging with somebody. And I don't want to be that person who's like, kids these days. And at the same time, those social skills are important, and connection, like actual connection, is really important, whether you're at the office or in your relationships, or, just talking to somebody at the coffee shop or talking to my neighbors when I'm walking my dog.
Sure. Yeah, they are absolutely critical. Let me ask you this, you took what seemed to be, based on what you said in your book, a rather low starting salary. Did
Yes.
you feel insulted by that? Did you feel as if, I deserve more than this kind of thing? I know you write about it at length throughout
Yeah.
your book, and the issue doesn't really get resolved toward the end, until the end of the book. How did that make you feel?
I was not happy. I was not happy with the offer. I actually was offered, and I'm always fine talking about numbers. I did that a lot as a freelancer, because especially when you're self-employed, if you won't talk about finances, other freelancers don't have, they don't have any standards to judge on. So years ago when I was writing for Cosmo, I think I was getting $1 a word, and then another writer said, oh, they'll pay $2 a word. Well, with that information, I can negotiate more effectively. But I did feel that I had been lowballed. I was offered 35,000. I said, I can't do that. I've got 2 kids. I can't do that. They came back with 45, and which was less than what I wanted. But again, I took on the job. Okay, I'm going to take this on. I'm going to get the health insurance. I'm going to write about it. And I actually still had a book under contract that I had to write that coming year. So that income was going to come in. And then I knew I was still going to freelance. So I could still do it. And it was, everything's a trade-off. When you choose option A, you're saying no to option B. But I was willing to do it for a year and to see what happened.
Sure. Millennials come under a lot of fire for all sorts of reasons, and I'm not here to take a view, on them one way or another, but how would you describe them in the workplace compared to maybe other generations you've known, whether it's, the baby boomers or Generation X?
In the first chapter of the book, I actually talked about that, because when I walked through the office, it was mostly millennials, maybe a few I don't think Gen Z was really there yet. But I was concerned as someone in her 50s, I thought, they're not going to like me, or they're going to call me grandma, or I mean, I was more concerned about working with them in the sense of, will they accept me? Not, oh no, I have to work with millennials. Millennials are great. I mean, and I think it comes down to attitude. So all the sales guys were millennials, the SEO guys were millennials. So I would just go over there with my coffee cup and say, hey, I got questions. I don't understand why we can't use the plural keyword. I don't understand this. Can you explain this to me? Can you help me with this? I think that especially as we get older, there's more of a resistance on people to admit what they don't know. So they don't say they don't know. I have never had a problem saying that I don't know how to do something, or I don't get it, or can you explain this to me? I typically couch it in terms of, here's what I've done. I looked at this, and I still have questions. So you're not asking for someone to spoon feed you, but this is how far along I've come, and I'm stuck. And what I found was, when I got over the fact in my head where I'm like, these could all be my kids, when I just took that out of my brain, I developed really good relationships with people. And I think now, as the oldest person on my team, trust me, I know I'm the oldest person. I don't feel like the oldest person, but I think that we all need to let go of those preconceived notions of, okay, boomer, or, millennials are this, or Gen Z is this, and just focus on people as individuals. And I think that's good advice for anybody.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. In fact, I spoke with somebody recently, not too long ago, who basically said very similar things too as well. So one of the things that millennials have done really well is they've done a great job of sort of improving life in the workplace. And part of that is because, they won't stand for conditions that perhaps our grandparents went through, or our parents went through by any means too as well. So actually quite complimentary.
I think there's some truth to that. And what I do see is a lot better work-life balance. Pretty much everyone I know has something they're passionate about in their life. It's not their job, it's something else. And the other part of that too is, I work with several people in their mid-20s to early 30s at my current job, and they are confident. These women are confident in a way I was not confident in my 20s, and maybe not even until my 30s. And especially for women, I think that's really empowering to see. These aren't, I get irritated when people are, oh, they're special snowflakes, partly because I don't think that's the truth, and partly because I'm raising two people in this younger generation coming up, and I don't want them to, whitewash my whole generation with whatever they think we are. So, but I think, I don't know, one of the best questions to ask is, even if, what'd you do this weekend? Or, what's something that you're really excited about? And I play 8-ball on Thursday nights. And last week there's, I think she's 27, 28. And we're talking, and a B-52 song came on. And I was like, oh, I actually saw them in concert at Ravinia. They're one of my favorite bands. She's like, they're one of my favorite bands. I'm like, you know who the B-52s are? So when you look for the connectors, or, you look for bridges, you find out you have a lot more in common than you might think you do.
There you go. Let me ask you this. You had been the work-at-home mom, stay-at-home mom for many years and all that. You were bringing up two kids. How did it go over when you told the kids, I've taken this job?
I don't recall them being particularly concerned. I think part of that, and you understand, as a former stay-at-home dad, when you're a good parent, your kids kind of know that everything will work out around them. You'll make all these things fall into place, and you will make everything work. I think there was a little bit of concern on my daughter's part, because she was still young enough I was going to have to put her in after school childcare, which I hadn't had to do before. And I had some guilt over that. And then I, rationalized it. It's only for several hours. The days that she's with her dad, she won't be there, and just kind of work that through. I think the kids were more concerned, is this going to change really anything in our lives? And once they knew that it wasn't going to, they were fine with it. And they were, let me think, 10 and 5. So, they weren't tiny babies, but they seemed like babies, but maybe 10 and 6, I think 10 and 6.
They're always babies. You spend a lot of time, talking about your boss, Frank. What was he like?
In a different situation, Frank and I actually could have been friends. I think that he was someone who couldn't completely trust the people who worked for him. And I'm someone who does not do very well in a micromanagement situation. Again, having been freelance for so long, I would say he was demanding, could be fair. I did learn quite a bit about my job from him and about interacting with people at the company from him. But one of the things he said to me pretty early on in my tenure there was, the company hasn't had somebody like you before. And I said, well, what does that mean? And he said, you ask all these questions, and most of the people here just want to come and do their jobs and go home. And I said, I just want to understand how all the different pieces fit together. This is, I'm, you know, like, what do we charge for this? How does this department fit in with this? That kind of thing. And I think it was more like a round peg trying to go in a square hole. It wasn't quite fitting.
Gotcha. It would seem from reading what I read about how you described, your day in, day out work, that writing outlines for reclaimed wood furniture, basketball camps, aircraft refurbishing, would sort of get monotonous. Or how did you find a way to sort of make it interesting?
Some jobs, some parts of a job you just can't make interesting, Doug. I'm sorry. I'm just a big believer in to-do lists, and some of the clients were actually really fun to write about and write for, and some were not. Compressed air systems was one of the ones where I was like, I know nothing about this. A manufacturer that made ball bearings. This is not, I like writing about health and wellness and service journalism,
Yeah.
but depending on the day, I always had my to-do list. And if I had, I would put the worst tasks first. I'm a big believer in eliminate the ugliest. Do the thing you most don't want to do first. Not necessarily the hardest thing, the thing you don't want to do. And just kind of tick them off the list. And then if I had a client that I really liked writing for, maybe that got, that's my mid-morning break, or, but again, coming from a freelance background, sometimes you're writing for clients or writing about subjects you love to write about. And sometimes you're writing about things that are not particularly interesting. That's the job. That's being a professional writer.
Sure, absolutely. What was it like? You're there at the office, and you come across someone who's got the big title. They are the big boss, and yet you sit there as you stand there, talk to them, sit there, talk to them. You realize, gee, I might be old enough to be there. Dare I say it, mother? How did that? What was that a shocking moment to you, or did you just say, I'm just gonna roll with it?
That's a good question. Now, at that particular company, the partners were all pretty much in my age group. Like we probably grew up listening to the same bands, you know what I mean? But then the next level down, there were a fair number of people who probably could have been my kid. But again, the company I work for now, our CEO, I don't even think he's 40. He's a wonderkind, but he and I speak the same language. We connected immediately. So I think that one of the good things about going back to work in your 50s, if you go in with an open attitude and you understand that smart people come in every age, you can connect with somebody. And I never had I have since worked for people much younger than me, and it has never been an issue. But I think that's because of me, because I'm not going to say, I'm old enough to be your mother. I can think that. I'm not going to say that. And I'm also not going to let it play out in my demeanor.
Yeah, gotcha. Understood. What, in given all that you've done, or that you had done prior to that, did the things of the terms like metrics, efficiency, SEO, did they throw you at all, or did you just did you understand them thoroughly and it didn't seem like a big deal? I ask only because, usually writers are writers, tech people are tech people, and rarely do they meet in between.
Yeah.
Maybe that was not your story.
It's funny because when as a freelancer, I pretty much specialize in health, fitness, wellness, nutrition. So if you said anything about the glycemic index or blood sugar or your lats versus your traps, or I know that language. I know that world. I worked in that world in a long time. But going into a business world where you'd hear things like, I need that sow, or I'll Slack you, or, there's a problem with the metadata. I honestly didn't know what anyone was talking about half the time. So I would just listen and try to kind of, put these things together and like, oh, an SOW, it's a statement of work. Okay. It's a proposal, or, and again, coming into any new industry, it's basically like being an employee right out of college. You know, you don't necessarily know the field that you're going to be working in. But I love words, and that's why I use those business terms for the titles. Every time I came up with a new one, I was like cackling to myself. I actually wrote a list of them when I was writing the book after I'd pulled all my notes together, and I was like, I'm going to use business words for each of these titles.
Good for you. So, what did you like most about the job? What was it that you thought really got you going, got the blood going, if you will?
You know, I love connecting with people, and I did create a lot of connections there. Once I was given a little more latitude, like I listened to the sales guys and I asked the sales guys questions, and they came to understand that I was truly interested. So I was able to learn a lot from them. But we had a number of processes, one in particular where it was a certain kind of content that we were sending out to writers. And I suggested to my boss, we could do this ourselves, because it was just inserting keywords into existing content. It wasn't expanding the page, and it wasn't writing an entirely new page. We call them reworks. And in the world of SEO, you basically take existing content and you put the keywords in the existing content. So it's kind of like a little puzzle where you have this piece of content. Where are we going to put the keyword? Where does it fit? And I suggested this process, and it was okayed, and it saved our department a lot of money. Plus, it gave me and Alyssa, one of the women I worked with, another kind of project to work on. So I like developing efficiencies like that. I wouldn't want to do it 24/7, but I really enjoy when you can look at something and say, wait, we could try it this way, and this might be even more effective. And the other aspect of the job that I really did love was I pushed to be put on client calls when we had a new client come on board, because I am a former ghostwriter, I'm a journalist. So when we were on the call, I would say, tell me what you want in terms of your content, who's your customer, who's your client. And then I would write up my notes and share them with everyone at the company who was going to work with that client. No one had done that before. It's a really good idea. So all of that, like when I send this to you, because you're going to create the content marketing asset, now you have all this information. That's very valuable. And I love doing stuff like that.
Yeah, it would seem in those parts of the book where you talked about interviewing clients and being on those calls, that my sense of it was, yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seemed as if you relished those moments the most because it provided you with a deeper understanding.
It provided me with a deeper understanding, and it was, again, that acknowledgement that we're humans. So when I'm sitting in my cubicle writing these outlines, AI hadn't come along yet, ChatGPT wasn't here yet, but you don't feel like a person when you're having a conversation with someone. And I remember this one client didn't want to use the word elderly, and I agreed, but the keyword that happened to have the word elderly in it, but being able to talk with her about it is much better than here's why, we're using this keyword. And just that acknowledgement of humanity, and also the acknowledgement that when someone tells me this is what I want, I can say, I hear you. And okay, the owner of your company does not use contractions. That to me is a little different because I use them all the time, but it's in our notes. Do not use contractions with this content. So I think that's very valuable. And people like to feel heard, and people like to feel listened to, and people like to feel understood. So.
Sure, absolutely. What did you like least about the job?
Oh, that's easy. Having to be there. I mean, seriously, having to be there for 8.5 hours, 5 days a week. I pushed immediately to be able to work from home 2 days a week. And then I got him to agree to 3 days a week. And I mean, I was pushing for 5 days a week, and then we got COVID and everybody went to 5 days a week.
Exactly. Work-life balance. This is a
Yeah.
continuing issue, not only for women, but also for men in some cases.
Yeah.
You know, but was your work-life balance better at home or at the office, or what were the struggles that you noticed and the differences that you noticed between having the full-time gig at the office
Yeah.
versus being the freelance writer at home?
Well, I think work-life balance is a myth. I just think that nobody can ever achieve it for longer than 2 or 3 days in a row. And then it goes by the wayside. The biggest challenge was, again, having to be chained to my desk for 8.5 hours a day. When you're freelancing and you're working from home, I could go to the store at noon if I wanted to, or I could, take my daughter to the doctor right after school, or all the little things I sometimes call them wife work, like going to the store, getting the dry cleaning done. Somebody needs to change the oil in the car. All these tasks that need to be done, I'm the person who has to do them because I'm the single parent in this household. Now I have to do them not during the day because I'm at work. So I have to do them when a lot of other people have to do them. So everything takes longer and nobody wants to go to the grocery store at 4:30 or 5 o'clock at night. I'm telling you now, you're tired, you're hungry, you buy all the bad food. And so that was the biggest challenge. And then I actually wrote about this at some point, but it was really important for me to cook dinner every night for my kids. And I gave up on that. I don't know, 2 or 3 months in, I just couldn't do it. Now I did give them, we had food together, but I had this idea, I'm going to cook dinner from scratch every night. And that was just an unrealistic goal for me. It was like, we'll eat together, we will sit together and eat together, but we might be eating takeout from Panda or a frozen pizza, or maybe I made, pasta with meatballs or whatever, but just letting myself off the hook a little bit was important.
Sure, sure. You talked about this in your book. I think you had a list of things, ways or why it's important not to piss off your boss. Let me ask you, did you piss him off frequently?
I did. Um, I did, and I did learn from that because if I'll give an example. This idea of me being on the client calls, I had suggested this early on. I said, wouldn't it be great if we had somebody from our department to be on these client calls at the outset? That way that person could find out what they want with content, and then we wouldn't get clients unhappy with the content we're producing. And my boss said, well, we don't have anyone in the department to do that. And I said, I could do it. I'd be happy to do it. Well, he said no. So I thought it was a good idea. So I went over his head and I went to the VP and suggested this idea because I haven't worked in corporate America for 22 years. I thought it was a good idea. He said no. So I just, so that was the kind of employee I was. And he was not happy with that kind of action. And they decided to put me on the client calls. And when he told me that, I couldn't resist saying, this is what I suggested. Again, I sometimes I'm sure he felt like, when the kid just keeps pushing back on you a little, a little, a little. So to be fair, I think there were issues on both sides of the relationship.
Sure, sure. Of course, when you went back to work full time, it sounded like there were a lot of coordination issues
Yeah.
with your ex-husband and with the children too as well. Did you two work well together when it came to the kids?
We did. I actually talked to Eric before I took the job and I told him, this is what I'm thinking about doing. And are you, if I ever get stuck, can you pick them up? And he was very flexible and very supportive of it. And his job, he worked from home. I think he worked from home pretty much exclusively at that point, but sometimes he had to travel for work. So when he traveled for work, then, and if it was during his time, the kids were still with me and we were very flexible. And we had a dog that went back and forth, and my cat, our cat went back and forth. So I can't imagine not having that kind of co-parenting relationship. We lived a mile apart too. So it was just very, had he not been so supportive, it would have been more challenging. But again, my goal was always to make enough money that he didn't have to pay me maintenance anymore. I'm like, that's my goal. And he's like, that's my goal too. So he was supportive of me, getting back into the corporate world.
Sure. Let's talk about the approach that you took when it came to seeking a raise and eventually becoming successful with it too as well. What was critical there to making that thing work out?
Well, I think I started talking about a raise within having been there for a month or two, which probably wasn't that smart. I did ask for a raise at 6 months because I recall during the interview that my boss had said I could, I was taking much less money than I wanted. And he said I could bring it up at 6 months. So when I did, I had put together, and I wish I would have kept a copy of it, but I had put together a 2-page letter that said, here are all the things I've done. I came up with this new process and that saved our department about $5,700. I was hired to do outlines, but I'm doing all these other tasks and I'm on these calls. And, I tried to show my value in terms of this is what I have brought. This job was paying $45,000, but this is actually what I'm doing. So I should be paid more. And they said no. They just said no. They weren't going to give me a raise. And I don't want to give away what happened, but I wasn't happy. I will say that I wasn't happy. I did get a raise at the end of the year, and then I actually continued at that company for another year and a half and got a couple more raises. I mean, I was steadily going up, but by the time I left, I didn't want my boss's job and I couldn't go any higher than I was. So I started looking around for something different.
So what prompted you to leave was you just really didn't see a future for yourself there beyond what you were already doing.
Correct. And kind of that glass ceiling feeling. Again, I didn't want to be the director of content, and that was the only job that was really above me in the content department. And I wanted a little more freedom and flexibility. And I found out about a position that it was a Swedish company, actually, completely remote workforce. And I was like, this sounds really appealing. So that's where I ended up going.
Good for you. When you think about everything that you went through professionally and personally, and certainly that in many ways brought about this book, what was the biggest thing you learned about yourself?
That's a good question. You know, I think I had a lot of anxiety going into, I mean, when you start a new job, it is stressful. You don't know the people, you don't know who you can trust, you don't know how to do the job. And you may not know how to log on to get into the spreadsheet, but you don't know who you're going to end up being friends with. You don't know the relationships. You know what I mean? You come in really cold. So I think I found out I was braver than I thought I was, but I also trying to think of how to answer this. It made me realize that who I had this idea that, I'm a freelancer first and foremost, that I had these skills that could translate into the workplace. And maybe I didn't have to be a freelancer, but I still felt like a freelancer on the inside. I don't think I really answered your question. I guess it was just, I was proud of myself for taking the challenge on, and trust me, I wanted to quit many times and I didn't, because I had promised myself I would stay for a year. And then at the end of the year, I got an okay raise and I was like, well, I guess I'll stay for another, you know what I mean? So I guess that I was proud of myself for putting myself in uncomfortable situations instead of being afraid to. I never, no matter how old I am, I never want to say no to something out of fear. Now, if it's no, because, okay, I've thought about it and these are the reasons I'm not going to do it, but I'm not going to jump out of an airplane ever. That's never going to happen. But my kids know if they say something, I will usually say, well, let me think about it, or let me think it through. I try not to say no, just off the bat.
Well, it sounds like you found out that you're far more resilient than you may have expected yourself to be.
Yes, I agree. Thank you. That's my answer, Doug.
You can use it anywhere you
Thank
want
you for
to
that.
Kelly. Let me ask you this. Obviously these days you've got, a lot of women, a lot of men who have worked at home, stayed at home. When you think about the best piece of advice that you can give everyone in terms of maybe having done what you have done and then gone back to work, the full-time gig at the office,
Yeah.
what kind of advice would you give them?
Wow. It's going to depend. It's going to depend on the person, but decide what your absolutes are. And for me, again, I gave up the idea that I'm going to make dinner from scratch every night. It was causing me way too much stress. It was more than I could handle. But one of my absolutes, maybe 3 to 5 mornings a week, I would go to the Y and work out before I went to work, because it gives me energy. It reduces my anxiety. I feel better. I feel, I come back, take a shower, go to work. Now, for some people, that might not be it. But for me, a good workout is going to set the tone for my whole rest of the day. So it was like, okay, I'm going to sacrifice making dinner from scratch. I'm not going to sacrifice these workouts. And something that I think is really important too is you can kind of tell through the book. I have a guy in my life who's wonderful, but I have really good friendships, and staying connected to those friends helped me tremendously. I mean, I would go at lunchtime, I would walk around the corporate area where our company was and call one of my friends and vent for 15 or 20 minutes. And I think I said on the 4th day, I called one of my friends and I was like, I've been here for 4 days and no one's given me a trophy or a plaque or, anything. But I think that maintaining those relationships during this time of transition is really important. super helpful to have people who are already in corporate America, because your freelance friends are probably not going to really understand what you're doing.
Sure. And that way you've got some people that you can actually bounce ideas off of, or
Yeah,
to strategically negotiate what you're going to
correct.
do.
Well, and like I said, when I went over Frank's head with that idea, and I told a couple of my friends who work in corporate America, they were like, "You did what?" I was like, "I didn't know." They're like, "You never do that. You never go over your boss's head." I was like, "I know now," you know?
Right. Exactly. Well, Kelly, this has been a fabulous interview. Thank you so very, very much for
Thank
your time
you.
today. Let me ask you, is the book already out in stores or soon
Oh,
to be?
I'm gonna hold up the cover so everybody can see it. Tell me if you can see that,
I
okay?
can see that. Yep.
The pub date is June 15th, so it'll be available then. It had a nice review in Library Journal, which I'm very appreciative of. And I will be doing a lot more promotion via Facebook, via LinkedIn, book events. If people want it for a book club, I'm happy to come join your book club virtually. I've already got a couple of those set up, so I'm happy to do anything that people are interested in. But yes, June 15th is the pub date.
Well, Kelly, thank you so very much. I wish you the best of success, and you publish more books, and we certainly hope you will come back.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I
All
really
right,
appreciate it.
Kelly, thank you.